PrimeGov.
Okay,
It's in waiting,
Yeah, that's,
uh-oh.
which is typical. So
Okay, let me see. I was just about to log back into mine.
PrimeGov.
Okay.
and just to give everyone a heads up,
waiting.
we are on
Yeah,
YouTube.
that's,
Great, Uh-oh. thank you. So we're gonna take a minute here. I know it's 5 o'clock. I am chairing for Counselor Abeyta tonight. He and Counselor Lindell are excused. And if I can pull up the agenda, if I can get PrimeGov to work, we'll start. But it's just circling. Counselor Cassett Sanchez, is it working for you? Up, there it is.
Yeah, I'm good over here, although it did take a minute.
Okay, well, we'll just go through the formalities, and if we have to stall a little bit while Counselor Villarreal gets hers to
I
load.
think mine's ready now.
Okay,
It's working.
perfect. So at 5:01, I call the Finance Committee meeting for April 5th to order. And if we could get a roll call, that'd be great.
All right. Counselor Villarreal.
Present. Sorry, I was about to drink something.
Okay. Counselor Cassett Sanchez.
Here,
Counselor Romero Worth.
I am here.
Counselor Abeyta.
He's excused.
And Counselor Lindell.
She is also excused. All right, so with that, we will go to approval of the agenda. Are there changes from staff to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, we are removing the presentation and items F through K.
F through K. All right. Let's see. Presentation and F through K. All right. Do we have a motion to amend the agenda as, or to approve the agenda as amended? There we go.
move to approve as amended.
Second.
All right. Can we get a roll call on approval of the amended agenda, please?
Counselor Villarreal.
Yes.
Counselor Cassett Sanchez. Sorry about that.
No problem, yes.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes. Okay. Approval of the consent agenda. Are there items the committee would like to hear? Yes, Counselor Cassett Sanchez.
Yes, I would like to remove B, D, and E, although we can discuss them as a group.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear B,
Oh.
V, and E.
B as in boy, D as in dog, E as in elephant.
There we go.
N as in Nancy, and I believe it's R as in rhinoceros.
Got a whole zoo tonight. Okay, Counselor Villarreal, are there items you want to hear?
Madam Chair, yes. Questions on item M as in Mary. I'd like to co-sponsor N, and we're talking about that. So, and then item O.
Oh. Okay, so so just to review, M and O are the ones you're pulling. Okay. All right, with that, do we have a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
And a roll call on approval of the consent agenda, please.
Counselor Villarreal.
Yes.
Counselor Cassett Sanchez.
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We don't have an executive session tonight. We do not have a presentation because that was taken off of our agenda. And so we'll move right into the consent items that have been pulled. And I believe we should start with B, D, and E. Counselor Cassett Sanchez, do you want to take them individually?
Do it. We can do the discussion. No, I want to take them as a group. Let's put it that
Okay.
way.
All right. So with that, you can proceed.
One moment,
Oh,
One
I'm
moment.
sorry.
Counselor Romero Worth, are we
We didn't approve the minutes.
approving the minutes?
I'm sorry, my error. Yes, let's do that. Are there changes to the minutes from staff or from
No
the counselor?
changes, Madam Chair.
Okay. If there are no changes, then a motion to approve.
Move to approve?
Second,
Roll call would
Yes.
be Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett Sanchez,
yes.
and Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes. And thank you for flagging that for us.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. All right, so now we'll go to items B, D, and E. Counselor Cassett Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I see Julie. Oh, hi, Julie. Wonderful. And then I know that Elizabeth Peterson is in the attendees room, and I wasn't sure if she needed to be let in either, but I'm sure Ms. Sanchez will let us know. So I was just looking at the changes in the scope of work for these items, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about why we changed the scope of work, because it is in all of them kind of a big decrease in the number of individuals that we were looking at for navigation. But then there's been an increase for those safety net services. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about those changes and what it potentially means for how we fund this moving forward.
So thank you. So Madam Chair, Councilwoman Cassett Sanchez. So that's a great question. So I'm going to apologize in advance. I have this very tiny child who's learning how to crawl and also is making bibbling and babbling noises. So she may interject her opinion. So currently, actually, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've actually been reevaluating a lot of our contracts and services. There has been an incredible need in the community for safety net services. So not only navigation, but the safety net services you can think of are the other kind of things that the agency provides. So it's not just navigation, but it might be pure counseling. It might be, GED services. It might be, showers or bed nights. And so what we've really seen is an increased need in those services. So not just the navigation, but also kind of all the other supportive services that the agency offers. Many of our contractors did not build those services into their contracts, unfortunately, even though we asked them pretty early on that if there are safety net services that they want to deliver under city contracts, to make sure that they put that in there in the beginning. A lot of the navigation services increased, but also, again, the need for the safety net.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. I had a conversation with Elizabeth Peterson about this earlier, and I thought this was important for us to look at as we're moving forward, as well as the price per person that we had built in for navigation and safety net services seemed not realistic in terms of knowing what safety net services cost. And I was hoping to hear a little bit more again about that and how we might be evaluating that moving forward, so we can understand what the funding needs are to meet the community through some of these services, and understanding that we are not the sole funders, that we also work with the county. And I believe we also, is there some private dollars that come into this, or foundation dollars?
Not yet, but that is the hope.
Okay. So yeah, a little bit more about how we are looking at these costs per person and how much this program actually costs to run, and what the value is there.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Councilwoman. So when we initially did the RFP, we allowed agencies to kind of choose what they felt like would take, or kind of choose what the navigation services would look like for their agency. The county did an initial evaluation, I want to say 2 years before our RFP was released, and they were still learning kind of that sweet number between navigation as a warm handoff and navigation as intensive. And so we allowed the agencies for this grant round to decide what it was for their agency, and the numbers varied wildly. And knowing that some of the agencies did really intensive navigation, but yet were billing inappropriate to where it really should have been, was an issue that we caught in our last actually the first year of our contract year. And so right now we're working with our consultants who are going to be doing an evaluation on all of our agencies that we're currently funding to decide a more streamlined number for navigation. So what is the cost for something that's considered a warm handoff? You know, me saying I'm going to be giving you a referral to, you know, La Familia versus somebody who actually walks somebody through the process to getting access to Social Security, SNAP benefits, getting them housed if they're formerly homeless. Like that should be a higher cost per participant. So the county's numbers didn't seem like they would reflect our agencies. So we didn't want to use their numbers right off the bat. And I think because so many of our agencies were new to this type of contract, we really wanted to have them decide before we decided the number, I guess, for them, you could say. I'm sorry, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And then my last question about this, one thing that I was concerned about, you know, when we had talked about some of the impacts of COVID and how just the change of the service models and the change of the volume of people that individuals were or individual organizations were able to serve, change the numbers of individuals that they were being able to provide navigation for. So for example, St. Elizabeth's could not have, as it says in our packet, could not have as many people on site, and therefore it changed the number of individuals receiving navigation. And one of my concerns there had to do with, so is there a population that needed navigation that we then weren't serving, that wasn't receiving navigation because access to some of these pieces or some of these services was decreased? And I was hoping to hear a little bit more about that, and if that's been the case, and if we expect an uptick as we open up and there maybe is greater volumes at St. Elizabeth's or more face-to-face interactions at Food Depot, for example.
So great question, Councilwoman Cassett Sanchez. So there was a lower population being served, but a lot of the navigation services for some agencies did increase. Some didn't see any increases or decreases at all. We do expect for services to pick up in the new fiscal year as things kind of start opening up. So a lot of these amendments are really temporary just for this fiscal year. And also for these some of these particular contracts, they'll be going out to RFP after this next fiscal year. So we expect to have not only a solidified number for navigation, but also a much more accurate contract for the services being delivered in the community.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Sanchez. That's definitely something that I want to make sure that we as a finance, probably also we as a quality of life committee, well, I'm sure we'll see this Wednesday, keep our eye on as we move forward and as these things continue to change. So those were all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Villarreal, do you have questions on this, on any of these items?
No, I was trying to figure out how to move to approve all three.
I'm betting we have to do them individually, but so maybe let's
Move
just,
to approve contract amendment for Santa Fe Recovery.
yeah,
Second.
we need a roll call then. Carolyn, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Councillor Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Councillor Villarreal,
Yes.
and Councillor Romero Worth.
Yes. And then if we could get a motion to do item D.
Move to approve contract for St. Elizabeth.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Councillor Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Councillor Romero Worth.
Yes. And then a motion to approve the Food Depot, item E.
Approve the Food Depot contract amendment.
Okay, that'll be Councillor Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Councillor Romero Worth.
Yes. All
Moves
right.
a lot faster with just three of us.
True. All right, so then we're going to move to item M. And Counselor Villarreal, I believe you pulled this item.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair.
And,
Let-
oh, do we need to, well, no, we didn't. So item M, just for everybody, is a resolution establishing a work plan for improving access to affordable housing. And I can't, for improving access to affordable housing opportunities for residents of the city of Santa Fe.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a few questions, kind of holistically how this will function, and I think it was more directed towards the sponsors. So maybe we can just talk about that briefly, and then I have specific questions and potential amendments that I may pose later on, but I just need to get kind of an understanding of the big picture first. So I don't know if, Madam Chair, you wanted to answer that, or
Sure, I'd be happy to. answer
even
what
Alexandra, if she has the info as well. So I guess I'm trying to think holistically about this, and I get what we're wanting to do, and the importance of it. And so I'm trying to think about, like, as we go through the various committees, how or who will prioritize the topics and the funding, maybe the areas that we want to explore.
Yeah, so I think the idea here is what we've done is we've taken our committee process and put it in a resolution so that we can, we don't need this resolution in order to move forward with the work. But I think it was, there was a desire to have something that expressed our commitment to working through the various policy solutions or potential funding streams that can be explored or tapped into or dedicated. And so we put our committee process into a resolution. So normally the committee chairs determine the agendas, and I certainly have been open to recommendations from counselors about items that they're interested in hearing. And I think the other chairs are as well. But some of the reports that have come to us with ideas for funding fit in particular committees. And so I can't remember where I was talking about this earlier. But for instance, there's a recommendation that we tap into our utility surpluses. And so that item to me naturally fits with the Public Works, Public Utilities Committee, because the staff, the people who staff that committee are most knowledgeable about our fund balances in those utility funds, why we have them, and whether that would be an appropriate place to pull money from. And so I think some of these things will naturally fit into particular committees. So for instance, the Finance Committee, I believe has already, well, we know this, we are the Finance Committee. We have started to look at what a general obligation bond might look like. And I think there was some instruction that, to explore, for instance, what Albuquerque has done and getting a better sense of what that looks like, right? So you're on, maybe it's a shorter time frame for those bonds. How much would they raise? What would be the impact to property taxes at different levels? And so the idea is, that one naturally fits with finance. So I think among the chairs, we can take the reports that have been brought and kind of divvy up where the work would most appropriately fit. And the idea is then, there would be presentations at the different committees, which is what we would do in a committee process anyway. and explore, there'll be a presentation of the pros and cons, the costs and benefits of using a particular fund. And, the memos and presentations that would be generated for those items after they were presented to the relevant committees would then be presented to a study session where the entire governing body would sit together and have the opportunity to discuss the findings, so that nobody's, left out because they don't serve on finance or they serve on public utilities, but don't, but so that, again, all the counselors could have the opportunity to sit together, have that information together, and talk about maybe an emerging path for where we find the $3 million a year that we're looking at. So sorry, a little long-winded, but that's, I think, the idea.
Okay, that's helpful, Madam Chair. And I guess what I'm wondering is that those of us that don't serve as chairs of these particular committees, how do we then prioritize some of the things that we want to explore that may be different from what has been brought forth through the committee chairs or mayor?
Well, I think any when I became the chair of the Quality of Life Committee, I called up all of the members of that committee and said, I'm interested in hearing about things that you would like to explore. And so I think any counselor can ask that a committee review whether it's an idea in the reports that have been brought to us with different ideas, we now have 2 items on our agenda tonight brought by individual counselors. So I think, certainly as a counselor, you can bring, if there's an idea you have that isn't in any of those reports and isn't currently being considered, you have that ability to bring it forward, and it would be assigned to the proper committees. So again, this is just our committee process in a resolution. We all have the ability to bring forth ideas.
Right. I guess with the housing aspects, though, there's some of us that have been interested in certain areas, and then we've been wanting to either meet as a group, work sessions or other, and then it goes forward without some of us, which is fine, because some of these things moving forward and efficiently, that's great. I want to make sure that there's an opportunity that if we're not committee chairs, that we can bring up any kind of topic to explore. And then we have that same equal option to do that and ability. The thing that also kind of concerns me is that then puts stress on staff. And so if there's all these ideas of like what we want to pursue, then that weighs on the staff to either do the research and bring it together. And so I'm wondering who's in charge of that process, like trying to structure it so that all these various departments are communicating with each other, so they're working on specific either a funding source or another kind of possibility or policy decision. Who leads them, like organizes them? Who's in charge of that process?
I suppose the city manager. I guess I'm not understanding it might be helpful. Is there a particular idea that isn't already out there that you're interested in? Because all of the ideas that have been suggested can be vetted through the committees. And then the idea is to bring forth the presentations in a study session where we all can sit together. Again, since I don't sit on Public Works and Public Utilities, and there are other counselors who don't sit on finance. And so how do we make sure that the information is provided to everybody at the same time for conversation?
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to think if there's a lot of ideas, some of them that have been like laid out in these presentations by community member or community groups. I'm just trying to figure out for staff how they provide or organize together so that they can get the information to the various committees. And I want to know who's in charge of that process. I think
I
They
mean,
might
what
want to
I,
know that too, so.
yeah, I mean, again, I think that the recommendations naturally fit into the committee process, right? So for instance, there is a bill in front of us tonight to take money from the Economic Development Fund. And that fund, we did discuss this, I think it was at Public Works and Public Utilities that idea was brought forward, and I, as a result of the conversation there, I have scheduled for us Wednesday night a presentation on the Economic Development Fund, which naturally fits, arguably it fits in two places. It could have been a presentation here at Finance because it's a fund, but I also thought economic development, naturally that staff falls under the Quality of Life Committee. And so we have a presentation Wednesday night from Director Rich Brown, and he will provide a presentation about the Economic Development Fund. And I think it's going to be really important for us to know what is that fund used for now, and what, if we take 50% of it and move it away, what are we doing to the work that's done with that fund? And so, for instance, that's something that I think naturally fits with Quality of Life Committee. So I think all of these things can be, we have the reports. The Quality of Life Committee, as you know, had presentations at the end of last year and the very beginning of this on those reports, and we'll just take the suggestions that were made and start to vet them through presentations. And I think, if there are other ideas out there, we'll figure out the appropriate staff. And so it sort of naturally, if it's a finance matter, it'll be the finance staff. If it's a quality of life matter, it'll be the quality of life. It's utilities, it'll be the utilities staffs.
I think though, what I'm wanting to know, and we may not have the answer now, is to make sure who is the lead person to coordinate all of the various departments, because what each of those departments are presenting, whether it's utilities or the affordable housing office or economic development or finance, though they need to be coordinated as well, because it's all connected, whether it's utilities or it's related to quality of life. There's still connections between all of those potential topic conversations for policy changes or funding options. So I'm just wanting to know, and I don't know if Rich knows that answer yet, but I'd like to know who's in charge of the process so that staff understands how they fit in. And I don't want it to be, it's going to be a lot of work for staff, I think, just the information they have to pull for us. So I just want to make sure that there's a concerted and coordinated effort.
Yeah, and I think it naturally will filter. This is our committee process, right? And it's going to take some time. And the good news is we funded the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for this fiscal year. I understand that there's a commitment to do it for next fiscal year. And so we will spend the greater part of this year probably going through these various things. And as the staff is coordinated currently through the city manager and the mayor's office and the department director. So I think that's just our natural process. And those are the people who will be involved. And to the extent that they need to be scheduled at committees, the committee chairs will be talking and scheduling things appropriately so that we get the information coming forward. And then again, we'll all sit together in a study session where we can make sure everybody hears it and has an opportunity to interact.
Rich, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal. The only thing I would say that there is a couple of different paths that will bring these subjects up, these topics. So, as a director of community development, I have those 5 departments, and Alex is a part of the team. So we have bi-weekly meetings. We bring up things that we're working on. We have our senior staff meeting where we have to express what's going on from the city standpoint. We have the city manager has a few sort of COVID and future forecasting meetings. And so these topics about what we're trying to do as relates to housing, et cetera, do come up in many, many different meetings. And so I'm like a sort of person with the ear to the ground, so I'm constantly figuring out how do we collaborate. And so it goes back and forth. And I think the Madam Chair, she talked about the Quality of Life Committee. She also has a meeting where she thinks about topics for the future. And so I come to the meeting and I suggest different items that I'm either working on or collaborating on, in particular with community health and safety. Both of us right now are doing a sort of a series, and it'll probably extend out to public works and public utilities. So there's different ways where we can make sure that collaboration is happening. And my team's kind of entrepreneurial, so they'll make sure that they glom onto stuff that's going on.
Yeah, I guess I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page so staff doesn't have to do extra work trying to determine what are the priorities that we're going to try to research first, and then having people throw different ideas from different committees and even committee chairs that are not, or people that are not committee chairs throwing out ideas. So I'm looking out for staff. It's not really my personal interest. I'm trying to figure out how they are supported. So
Madam Chair, can I add one more thing? Because I want to ask Alexandra Ladd to add on, because she's been working cross-department on a couple things. She has a scattered site development, for example, and we're working across departments on that sort of thing. So I think that you're great, and I appreciate that you are concerned about our staff health and safety after we come out of this pandemic. But there is, I think this pandemic gave us a good sense of we needed to work together. We were working in silos prior to that, and this pandemic, I think, brought us together a little bit more. So I think you'll see some of those efforts going forward. But maybe Alexandra might be able to talk about the work she's doing right now, she's working with. So,
thank you, Madam Chair. I think Councillor Villarreal and I had a conversation a little bit about this resolution because of her leadership on the Community Development Commission, and I will express concern, and I really appreciate her bringing this up, in that usually a resolution that calls for this kind of this scope of work would have a directive in it that would lay out who's taking charge of putting together the plan to accomplish the scope of work. So there's kind of two plans here. We're looking at the bigger outcome, which is this housing plan, which is a direct result of the committee work and of the meeting with all of the councilors. But there's also usually a directive that says the city manager will direct staff to come up with a process for making this happen. And I think maybe to that point, the topic areas will fall into line quite naturally, as you mentioned, but I would hope that we could have a pretty specific process for how individual staff will lend their expertise to each committee meeting when that topic is discussed.
Yeah, and I guess, I thought that would just naturally happen. I mean, that's just the way our governance structure is set up. So, and again, I don't know, to me, this is very targeted. So what we're looking at is revenue streams for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right? So we've been offered a bunch of ideas about how to fund that fund. And so my sense of it was that we would just, take the different ideas that have been presented to us and parse them out to the different committees. And based on the staff that staffs those committees, and just begin to work through them for their viability and for their, what they can or can't do in terms of providing the level of funding that we need on a regular basis, right? So, we know that, for instance, the one that's pending right now, the sale of city land, is a variable source. So that might not be the best one to lean on, since we don't know year to year how much city land will be sold. And the other thing is, I think after Wednesday night, we may realize that the impact to taking 50% is too high. And maybe we don't want to hit that fund and its uses at that level. Maybe we want to do it at a smaller level because of its variability. It's not a place to get a consistent level of funding, and because it's detrimental to other priorities we have. So I think that's what we're going to find as we start to chip away with these things. I think the idea of pulling utility funds, they naturally looked like a great place to scoop up a bunch of money because it's just sitting there. But I think we're going to find as we dive into those presentations that there's a reason why those utility funds are as large as they are. And there are some legal requirements that they be that way for particular purposes. And therefore, they too don't provide the kind of funding that we're looking for. So I think that these things, again, through the committee process, through the mayor and the city manager, will sort themselves out. And of course, if counselors have other ideas that nobody has thought of, let's schedule a presentation at the appropriate committee and have that idea vetted. I mean, I think what this demonstrates with all the sponsors on this committee is that we're all committed to finding the money to make sure that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund has the level of funding. So I think, Councilor Villarreal, I'd love to set up a meeting with you and talk about the experience you've had working with this fund and schedule presentations that you find that maybe we don't have yet with the Quality of Life Committee. So,
yeah, I think that'd be helpful. I also want to make sure that the Community Development Commission members are included in the process. So, and leads me to my other point. And there's some resolution or amendments that I'll be making just to tweak some of the language. Just these are some examples. We need the updated 2020 median sales price number. We have a 2019 in the resolution. We talk about fee in lieu of that dramatically increased, but it actually was multifamily housing development applications that increased since 2016. So there's just little tweaks that are not major. It more enhances this resolution. It includes the Community Development Commission and recognition of it, that it's actually one of the bodies that help acknowledge, or it helps funding recommendations. They're administered through CDC. And then there's just some other language changes, but in the therefore be it resolved section, we talk specifically about the Quality of Life Committee's role as defined in the resolution, but we don't actually talk about the other committees. So I'm wondering why it was just Quality of Life. Don't we want to state the other committee roles?
Yeah, it was just because of this particular idea. So the idea that we need to think about, if we want to do these wraparound services, who is in the best position to explore, what that would look like? What level of funding do we need? What level of funding do we have? Is this just something that we, through the budget process, decide every year what the level is? Or is it, like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund? Is it something, that requires a fund? I have to say, I personally am a little reluctant to create funds and dedicate revenue streams, because it ties our hands as a finance committee from making the priority decisions that we make through the budgeting process. So this was a way of let's explore what kinds of wraparound services we're going to need to support this housing model that we are pursuing, and that naturally falls with quality of life. So I don't think anybody wanted to spell out, go through all the reports and spell out every funding idea that's come to us and slate it into this resolution. It's really not necessary, because again, this is our committee process.
I understand that. I guess what I'm saying is that's an important piece. So why aren't we talking about not specific things that we're doing, but the quality of life? It says what we would explore. So why aren't we talking about, I guess I'm just saying, it's just singling out quality of life which has an important role, but so does finance, so does the utilities committee, so does the community development commission, so does the maybe even the economic development committee. So I'm trying to figure out like why we said it this way. I don't know.
Because
Not an answer, but I don't know if
Yeah.
I need an answer. I just think it sounds a little odd. Because
Well,
it's
we
just
did-
one committee. We're not talking about all the rest of the
we
committees.
did though, in the very first be it resolved,
but this
that the 3 city council standing committees shall take on the work of reviewing, evaluating, and assessing a broad set of proposals and recommendations for revenue sources that would achieve long-term, sustainable, predictable, equitable, and consistent funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, with the goal of expanding access to housing opportunities for all residents, regardless of income or type of housing need. So that's really where the other 3 committees came in. I mean, we can name them if you want. But again, you know, some of this too is just like I think we're conveying the structure without bogging the resolution down with too much detail.
Well, that's why I think the quality of life detail may not necessarily need to be there because we don't know yet what they want to look at, what we want to look at on the committee. Just a thought that might be
Well,
an-
but we do know that we need to look at the funding level for wraparound services because that is a model that we're pursuing as a city. So the committee that's charged with looking at that type of thing is the quality of life committee. I mean, if you don't want to name the committee, we could say the appropriate committee but we know that that's the quality of life committee based on what it's charged to do.
Yeah, I'm
which is
just
to look
thinking that
at-
other committees, I don't know how specific or detailed we want to get. I think the one that you read that starts off the therefore be it resolved makes sense because it's generally saying these standing committees, and I'm adding the Community Development Commission in that part, but that it's saying it broadly about what the goal is. And then it starts, I don't know, I think it's inconsistent language, but I will probably just make an amendment to see what other ways we can state that. Because I do think the Quality of Life Committee has an important role. I'm just trying to figure out why.
So you're trying to figure out how to put the Community Development Commission into this work plan?
I will be making that amendment so that it adds it at the beginning,
I'm happy to work with you.
not specific to every single thing we could do, but it would say the 3 committees as well as the the Community Development Commission. So the language, I just want
Okay.
to, we can tighten it up a little bit.
I'd be
then
happy to work with you.
the last therefore be it resolved seems a little bit out of sorts, and I'm wondering how it fits in.
So the reason it fits in,
Planning.
so the reason it fits in is that as we talk about all this housing that we need for the city, some natural questions arise, which is, where are you going to put this housing? Have you thought about its impact on the quality of life? Have you looked at infrastructure needs? Have you looked at water? Have you looked at, the other aspects of what this putting more housing in the city will do? And so it's led to a very serious conversation about how we begin to do a growth management process and begin to look at those larger issues and make sure that we're thinking about that. And so that too is going to take some time. And we want to acknowledge that we are not doing this in isolation, that we're not just plopping down housing without any thought about it. We want to do that in a larger construct and think about all the impacts that putting more housing in the community makes, and making sure that we're doing it appropriately.
Got it. Yeah, I think I'll be making some minor changes just so.
Yeah, and it's something that's come up as we've talked about this. It came up in the, in the presentations of quality of life when we were starting to vet, some of these ideas and the need for funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It's, I know I've gotten emails from constituents who've said, hey, where are you going to put this housing? And hey, how can we, can we afford to do this? Is this, have you thought about what it's going to impact over here or there or whatever? And so this was a way of acknowledging that, yes, we understand that there are larger impacts, and we are going to begin a process to look at them in a holistic way, and not just, do stuff and not realize what it's doing, what the ripple effect is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. I was trying to figure out what that would look like. I think it also applies to sector plans that are not updated. And
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, this is part of a big, yeah, no, this is part, and that's the thing is so, and I believe Eli Isaacson is, has begun to think about this. And we need to think about a planning process so that we can start to do all that very specific work, and how we go about doing that. So yeah, I mean, it's overdue. So
yeah. Yeah, I think I'll just work with staff to make some other adjustments, amendments to the resolution, just to tighten it up and acknowledge some of the other work of the Community Development Commission and maybe others. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Councilor Cassett Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, actually, I'm really excited about that growth management piece being in there. I know this is something that I've harped on quite a bit in a variety of meetings about the need to be looking at where this is fitting in and what does this neighborhood planning piece look like. And I've had a number of conversations with Director Isaacson about growth management planning and what that really means, and educating myself a bit on what's included in growth management planning. But I do think that is something that'll be really interesting to be diving into. And I'm hoping that will also, updates and presentations on where we are with that will come up through, I would imagine, quality of life. That's where it sits. So, and then to speak to the other conversation about quality of life committee being called out, I think the way that I'm understanding and how I'm interpreting it is that the general purpose is looking at the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. All three committees have this. And then there's kind of this other piece that needs to be addressed. And that's why the other three committees aren't really called out, because I can't think of what there might be for other committees that's not related to Affordable Housing Trust Fund funding. But I would, if anybody here, can think of something that would be related, that would be committee specific, I'd be interested in hearing more about that. As long as we're on this, I do have a couple questions that are a little bit technical and I think will require some amendments. So on page 3, lines 8 through 10, Alexandra, this will be in your ballpark. I'm not sure that it's a fully accurate description of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, because it says the expenditures are restricted to the construction, preservation, and rehabilitation of affordable units or supportive housing facilities. But my understanding is that we can also utilize it for rental and down payment assistance. Am I correct in that understanding?
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett Sanchez, you are. The area that direct financial assistance to income certified homeowners falls under is in the law is this, it's a little bit gray, but it's called the operating costs of housing. So it's how do you support the ability of the person to afford it as well. So that's yeah, I think you're right. We could probably add a little bit more clarifying language in that section to just indicate that direct financial assistance is also eligible.
Perfect. And I will, I'll work with you, Alexandra, to come up with the appropriate language and bring that forward by Wednesday.
I actually have some Cassett Sanchez, Councilor Cassett Sanchez, of changes that are related to that. So maybe we should do this together so we don't duplicate efforts.
Perfect. Let's chat. And then the other one, and maybe
hold on a second. I think
Brad, go ahead.
Brad is wanting to interject his wisdom here.
So I just want to be very cautious that please include finance in this discussion. When you start talking about the use of bond proceeds for operating expense like rental reimbursement and things like that, that is simply not allowable. And so we have, you know, so, and I'm only speaking basically on bond proceeds.
Yeah.
Now, the
So,
city's tax revenues, that's no problem. You guys have all the authority you need. Bond proceeds, I'd like to run everything through bond council first.
yeah. So Brad, I think it may be that what happens when we get to the end of this is that we have a number of different funding streams to get to the level of funding we want, and that they will be dedicated appropriately for the types of things. So I don't think you need to worry about that, but I hear you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Councilor Cassett Sanchez, you still have the floor.
Thank you so much. And then the next one, and again, Councilwoman Villarreal, you may also already have this one, is page 3, lines 13 through 15. I don't believe is accurate because it says that we are implementing the property management plus housing model, but the city is not implementing it. We helped finance purchasing the building and somebody else is actually doing the implementation. Is that accurate?
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett Sanchez, it is accurate specific to Santa Fe Suites. I think the language in this clause, now that I'm actually reading what it says, is just this idea that we're no longer looking at, oh, well, as long as we throw some money to subsidize construction, then we're done with our job. That we're actually looking at, we want to actively, as a governing body, as a public finance agency, we want to actively support this idea that it's not enough to just provide the units, that the units have, for certain populations, the units have to come with this very robust support services model, which is called this is what Community Solutions calls it, the Property Management Plus model, but it's very applicable in a general sense as well. And so I think the message there is that we're trying to ensure that all future uses of the housing funds are leveraging this Property Management Plus model.
Okay. All right, perfect. So, and I feel like I'd like to massage that language a little bit more, because the way that I'm reading this right now is that, we have a team in community services or something that's actually doing the work on the ground, which isn't accurate. But thank you for that explanation. And Councilwoman Villarreal, if we'll throw that one in together if it wasn't already on your list. So those were all of my questions and comments for this one. Thank you.
Great. What's the pleasure of the committee?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Can we get a roll call, please?
Councillor Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Councillor Villarreal,
Yes.
and Councillor Romero Worth.
Yes. All right, then we are moving on to item N, and I believe Councilor Cassett Sanchez, you pulled item N, correct?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to play Prime Gov, and I have all
So
of
that's,
the-
so let me just so everybody knows what we're talking about, an ordinance amending section 11-14.5 to dedicate half the sales from any sale or lease of city-owned land and buildings to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and amending section 26-3.6 to add the dedication to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And this, again, this is the bill I was speaking of earlier that we will be hearing a presentation Wednesday night on, but go ahead, you have the floor.
Well, so that was actually what I wanted to talk about, was the impact of the Economic Development Fund, and seeing as we will be having a full presentation and discussion at that on quality of life, and all three of us are on quality of life, I do not feel a need to repeat that conversation tonight. So I'm happy to move for approval.
Is there a second?
On N, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Second.
Okay, can we get a roll call?
Yes. Councillor Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Councillor Romero Worth.
Yes. All right, item O, I believe Councilor Villarreal, you pulled this item, and if I can get my Prime Gov to work, an ordinance amending section 18.11.3 to define taxable premises consistently with state statute and to add a definition for permanent resident, amending section 18-11.8 to make it consistent with the state statute, amending section 18-11.17 to differentiate between the occupancy tax and the convention center fee, and to dedicate the occupancy tax collected on the 31st day and subsequent days to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I'm not going to read the rest of that, but I think we all have the gist of what's happening here.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple questions as a follow-up to the Community Development Commission. We looked over this and had clarifying questions, and we went through staff through Director Brown to send it on to Director Randall to just get some clarity. And I think there were some changes. I try to compare those questions to that we had to the new draft. I think this is a new draft. I know there was a memo that was something we asked for. The one thing I still wanted to understand that wasn't able to be answered at our last CDC meeting was a need for a deeper explanation about the taxable premises. And there were a lot of premises, different types of lodging and other premises, as they were called, taken out. They were eliminated. So I'm wondering if you could explain that a little bit more. I don't know if we do that.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Counselor, I think all of those things were eliminated to just simply a hotel, motel, or other premises for lodging that's not the vendee's household or primary residence. It seemed like there was a lot of unnecessary language in there. By specifying so many things, it might have left something out by omission. So I think the idea was to clarify it through simplicity.
Okay, I guess there were some that I thought, well, it's not a hotel and it's not a motel. So how does it fit into taxable premises, like timeshares?
But Madam Chair, that would be under the other premises for lodging. That's that catch-all that catches everything that's not a hotel and a motel.
Okay, so you don't think,
Short-term rentals, a private home in someone's house, that would be, all of those would be premises for lodging.
so we don't have to specify or explicitly state like bed and breakfast or a timeshare, or I'm just picking out ones that were crossed
Sure.
out.
Madam Chair, Counselor, I think that was the premise here.
Do we need a,
By not specifying, we therefore didn't leave something out.
do we need a definition though? Do we
It-
have that? I mean, that
For
is,
premises for lodging?
so that taxable premises, that section I'm looking at, that is the definition, correct?
Madam Chair, Counselor, yes. And then lodging up above, it states means the rooms or accommodations furnished by a vendor or vendee by a taxable service of lodging. So
Okay.
it kind of, I think it gets it. I don't think it was necessary to eliminate all of those, but someone did. So I think it still covers it though.
Okay, as long as, and this has already been vetted by our attorney's office, is that correct?
Madam Chair, Counselor, that's correct.
Okay. So where does, just so I know, and this was a question about short-term rentals or Airbnb, where do they fit into this particular?
Madam Chair, Counselor, they would be other premises for lodging.
Okay, so we don't have to define that specifically?
No, I don't
Okay.
think it's necessary.
All right. The other question,
Madam Chair?
Brad?
Yeah, to go on with what Randy's explanation was, and this goes to the expense side of it. You know, the Treasury Division is asking for a full-time lodger's tax administrator to be funded by the lodger's tax in this FIR. And the reason, one of the primary reasons we are asking for this new position is that every rental property in Santa Fe is potentially lodger's tax, eligible. As Randy said, by not defining what it is, that means everything is taxable. And so we really come down to the word permanent residence as opposed to type of venue that they're renting. And so and that means, like, when you think about all the rentals, that's all the hotels, motels, short-term rentals, apartment buildings, residential premises are all subject to lodger's tax law now. And so we expect a huge inflow of tax returns, and we need bodies to process those. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Bradley. So maybe this is also a question for you, Bradley, about a way with this particular resolution, actually ordinance change. Was there a way that we were forecasting potential revenue from this change?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, Randy and I, what we did is we sampled some Airbnb tax returns. And what we discovered is that roughly 20% of Airbnb's total revenues, they were exempting for the 30-day rule. They were not exempting no other exemption was used, just the 30-day rule. And in that, they were roughly 20% of their revenues. And in the months we were looking, they were $30,000 to $40,000 of potential lodger's tax revenue that the city was foregoing because of this 30-day exemption. We based our estimate on Airbnb and their relative weight to total short-term rentals. But there's really no way we can, when you say permanent residence, that's the question. I moved here from Alaska into an apartment building. Was that going to be my permanent residence? No. I was there until I could buy a house. But was it my primary residence for tax purposes? And the answer is yes. Is it where I receive my mail? Yes. Is it where I pay my bills? Yes. And so I think we're breeding a lot of confusion, and we really need to focus on the words permanent residence, because what does permanent mean and what does residence mean? But that's my 2 cents.
But Madam Chair and Councilor, the operative word is primary residence, and that is in the definition of permanent residence. So I would happen to disagree with Brad when he moved here and started paying tax in this jurisdiction without regard to whether he was renting. That was his primary residence, and he would not be subject to paying, and the owner wouldn't be subject to collecting lodger's tax for that, because it was where he was paying tax. And that's what we're trying to use as the definition for clarity. And frankly, some of our friends from Texas who prefer to say their primary residence is in Texas, but spending a great deal of their time here in New Mexico, will now have to pay lodger's tax in order to keep their tax-free status in Texas. So I think that was the best way we thought we could come with the clarification that Brad just mentioned.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm just trying to figure out, like, after this change, are we able to forecast what potential revenue would come through?
Well, Madam Chair, Councilor, yes, we did forecast 100. It's in the FIR. 150,000 would come in this fiscal year. Now, obviously, it depends on how quickly we can get this enforced. 576 in the next complete fiscal year, and then up to 625,000 in the third year. But it really, as Brad suggested, is an estimate based on what Airbnb is taking as a deduction. We don't know yet the impact of non-short-term rental taxes that will be collected that of owners who don't even have a short-term rental license. It's gonna, and that's gonna take some time to get enacted. And that's going to take some time to get the word out that those, in fact, and do the enforcement part of it. So it may happen faster, may happen a little slower, but that was the best estimate. And of that, probably you see the regular lodger's tax has not been collected in the past on the first 30 days either. Once they got to 31, it was forgiven all the way back to day one. So this will increase of that 576,000 for next year. My guess is maybe 175 of that will add to the lodger's tax that supports the tourism and arts and culture. And the other 400,000 may be the number that goes to the Affordable Housing Trust. We know the answer to that.
Madam Chair, and we really used a 1/3, 2/3 ratio in the projections in the FIR. 1/3 would go to lodger's tax, 2/3 would go to the Affordable Housing Trust.
But that's a guess.
That's it. Yeah, it's a guess.
That was helpful. That was what I was looking for. And then the other question that you brought up, Randy, about getting the word out. How are you all planning to let people know this is happening and that they're complying and the enforcement side of things? What does that look like?
Well, obviously, Madam Chair, Councilor, obviously we can communicate directly with the people who do have short-term rental licenses with the city. We can communicate with the hotels and motels, although they won't be impacted anywhere near as much except during the legislative session where lobbyists stay in a hotel. That's the main time that they have more than 30-day rentals. I think the newspaper, I think we'll work hard to get this in the newspaper. Councilor Cassette Sanchez called me about this ordinance earlier with a few questions, and I even suggested to her if we can catch a few people out of compliance, that becomes more newsworthy. And so I think we're going to have to do a few things to make it newsworthy. Otherwise, it will be considered boring news by the newspaper, and we only get in on a slow day. So, but I think we'll make a concerted effort to spread the word through the realtors. Would be another source, of course, to inform all the real estate companies that this ordinance now goes beyond short-term rentals and into any rental that is not a primary residence rental.
Got it. Thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Okay, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Can we get a roll call?
Yes. Councilor Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Cassette Sanchez,
Yes.
and Councilor Romero Worth.
Yes.
It's approved.
All right, thank you. Now we are on to the last item, item R. And I believe Councilor Cassette Sanchez, you pulled this. Let me just read the title here. An ordinance regarding the Independent Salary Commission, amending section 6-19.1 to make clarifications, amending section 6-19.2 to change the effective date of the salary to align with the term for mayor set forth in the Santa Fe Election Code, amending section 16-19.3 to establish an application process and modify length of the commissioner's terms, and amending section 16-19.4 to set the future schedule up for the Independent Salary Commission. And Councilor Cassette Sanchez, you pulled this, correct?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I just had a couple quick questions. So my first is, we'll basically get a pool of applicants who will apply, and then they would still be then selected by the mayor, appointed by the mayor, and approved by the governing body. So that normal process for a commission would still be standing.
Chair Romero Worth, Councilor, that's correct. That part is not proposed to change at this point.
Okay, Okay, perfect. And then my question is, I know there was a conversation at Public Works Utilities about this, but at that point, my tiny human was voicing his opinions on things similar to Julie Sanchez's was earlier. And what about this year and what are we going to do about what's going on this year? Do we have to do, I think we do have to do something this year. So if I can just get a bit more information on how we address this.
Councillor Chairwoman Romero Worth, with this change, you would remove the requirement to do something this year.
Okay, I must have, where? Sorry, I must have.
There's a clause that says beginning in 2023.
Oh, 2024.
24.
And okay, and so that removes our requirement to do something this year because we've essentially we'll be replacing what is currently standing with this ordinance now.
Correct, yes.
Sounds good to me. Move for approval. Oh, unless there's other questions.
Say that again. This is not applicable for this year?
Correct.
Chairwoman, Councillor, correct. That's part of, that's the reason I'm specifically supporting this, is it removes a legal problem that I think this current ordinance creates. I often don't take a policy position, but I think this is a good idea for the city.
So what you're saying, sorry, I was listening but not listening, but this particular salary commission will not be what do you call it? Enacted this year?
I mean, yeah, Chairwoman, Councillor, that's correct. If these changes pass, then it would delay the process until 2023. And then the current salary that's been established by the prior salary commission would remain in place for now.
And if I can add, I believe this is true. So it wouldn't, whoever's elected mayor in the election in November, this would not impact. It wouldn't be till the next mayor, whoever that is, would be impacted by the decision of the council of this commission.
Okay, so what was the word that you used, Councilor Meadoworth, that the committee constituted? So
or convened or
so we're staying with the current salary then, and we just bypass this for the year. This year. Okay.
Yeah, because I think that one of the big problems is that when we moved our election from March to November, we didn't move this process to align with that change. And now we're in a situation where we have 2 announced candidates for mayor and we're in an election cycle. And the whole point of the outlined process was that it be a year prior to the start of a mayoral election. And so this is part of the reason why it's also why we're trying to get this passed before the end of April, because our current law says that we have to have this commission meet by the end of April. But if we change the construct of it, then we don't have to do that.
Got it. That is so helpful. I don't know how I missed that in the memo. I was still thinking this was still in process, and it was worrying me because I'm like, who is making the selection? And does the mayor end up still appointing? And I was getting confused because I did see the 2024 and I thought moving forward, that would be the date we would follow. But we're saying that this is a moot point for this year. We're setting the regulations and the language changes so that we can be prepared for 2024. Okay. Thank you. That was good.
And I think the other piece of this is that it also buys us time. I think we're about due for another charter review commission. Maybe this is something they want to take up, and maybe we don't want a commission to set the mayor's salary. Maybe we want to tie it to some index out there that says it rises with, I don't know what, inflation or whatever, the CPI, cost of living, I don't know, that's above my pay grade at the moment, but or maybe we want the commission to be constructed in a different way. But all of that could be explored and there would be more time to do it.
Got it. That makes sense. It could also look at potentially looking at counselor salaries as well, which has never been looked at. Anyway, all right, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, so we had a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, if we could get a roll call, and thank you, Erin, for joining us tonight.
That'll be Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Thank you, ladies.
All right, I think I'm gonna make sure that I don't do it wrong. I'm gonna look through here. R was the last thing that was pulled. All right, now we go from action items. We do not have any tonight. And then I will go to matters from staff. Do we have any matters, staff?
Yes, Madam Chair, we just have one thing. We just wanted to make you aware that the department budget hearing schedule will be emailed to you all later this evening.
Terrific.
Excellent.
Okay, and then the matters from the committee. Committee members, do you have anything?
That was my question, actually. What was the schedule and then the timeframes? Because there were some days that we went to 4, not 5, and I couldn't remember which days they were. So that'll be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, and then matters from the chair. I'm filling in for the chair, so I do not have any matters. But the next meeting of the Finance Committee is Monday, April 19th. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.